In this video, we're going to explore osteoporosis. What are my risks and are the treatments worth it? Hopefully, it will shed new light on how we go about determining our risks and viewing our choices. The main question a person may have when a drug is prescribed for their osteoporosis is whether it's going to be worth it for them. So let's take a look at a study that was originally done in 2016, and here it's reported on the Harvard Health blog in 2019. It's about a new therapy for osteoporosis using the drug romosozumab, and it was approved to treat postmenopausal women that were at high risk of bone fracture. So what does the research tell us? Well, it's a pretty big trial with over 7,000 postmenopausal women with osteoporosis enrolled. Now, half of these would receive the drug, and the other half would receive a placebo. So in the results, we're simply looking at the difference in numbers between those two groups of women who suffered a vertebral fracture. That's a fracture of the spine. So in the treated group, we can see that 16 out of 3,321 women suffered a fracture of the spine. So that's about 0.5% of the group. And when we look at the placebo group, that's the group that had no treatment, we see that 59 out of 3,322 suffered a fracture, which is about 1.8%. So you have to remember that of the untreated group, we've still got 3,263 people that are okay. So they didn't suffer a fracture. So when we're looking at the difference, or how many people did the drug help, you can see that the difference is 43. So it actually helped 43 people. Now we need to ask, what are the odds of this drug working for me? In order to do this, we're going to take the number of people it helped, which is 43, and work out what this is as a percentage of that group. So we divide it by the number in that group, which is 3,321, and using the calculator, we can see that this is 0.0129. To get this as a percentage, we simply multiply by 100, and we can see that it helped 1.3%. That's a pretty small number. We're going to round that number down to the nearest whole number, which is 1, and then we would say it helped 1%, or 1 in 100. What this actually means is that you have to treat 100 people to benefit one person. Looking at these statistics, how would you then feel if your specialist said to you, if you take this drug, you could reduce your risk of fracture by 73%? I think you might be a little confused, but I still think you'd think it was a really good option. So how does the 1 in 100, or helping one person in 100, convert to a 73 reduction of risk? Well, it's known as a relative statistic, and relative statistics ignore the members of the group that stayed well and just focus on those that had a fracture in each group. Then it takes the difference, which in this case is 43, and converts it to a percentage of 59. In other words, what is 43 relative to 59? So let's get the calculator out. You want to divide 43 by 59, which will give you 0.728. To make this into a percentage, we just multiply it by 100, and there you've got your answer, rounded to the nearest whole number, which is 73%. So 43 is 73% of 59, and that's how they work out the reduction of risk. But it only really applies to those that are most vulnerable in the group, and you may have no way of knowing where you fit, being that the majority stayed well. Sometimes these statistics can be given as an increase in risk. In other words, by not taking the drug, you will increase your risk of fracture. Again, this is a relative statistic which just compares the difference between the two groups. In this case, we're looking at how many times greater 59 is to 16. And just by looking, you can see that it is nearly 4 times greater than 16. So we would say that the risk is increased fourfold. Let's have a recap on the statistics. When we're looking at the reduction or increase of risk, we're simply comparing against the numbers of people who got sick in each group. So really, they are a ratio between the various numbers. However, when we're looking at the numbers needed to treat, or what's the odds of this treatment working for me, we're looking at the whole group or everyone. So no matter whether they got sick or not, everyone who is on the trial is counted. And that's why the numbers needed to treat are more relevant and meaningful to know than any of these other relative statistics. We can represent the numbers needed to treat as a bar chart. If you remember, the number of people it helped was just 43 out of 3,321. And when presented on the chart at 1.3%, it doesn't look too good. And you may consider that the odds of it helping aren't worth it, particularly if you can do things to help yourself, such as lifestyle change. If you're interested in the study, it's worth reading, and I've given the link above. It was a 2-year study, and during the second year, the group was taken off the trial drug, and both groups were given denosumab for a year. So the difference in fracture rates for the spine are not that impressive. At the 12 months, we can see the 0.5% in the treated group versus the 1.8% in the placebo group. And at 24 months, we see a fracture rate at 0.6% in the treated group versus 2.5% in the placebo group, which means that 97.5% of the women in the placebo group were fracture-free at that 2-year period. They also measure non-vertebral fracture rates, which means fractures of the femur, which is the top of the leg, or other parts of the body. They've only given the 12-month rates, which again are relatively disappointing. We have 1.6% rate in the treated group and only a 2.1 rate in the placebo group. So that's a difference of 0.5%, which means that the numbers needed to treat would be 200. In other words, you would need to treat 200 women in order to reduce the risk of non-vertebral fracture for one woman. So when we're taking into account any risks for the drug, how long you'd have to take the drug, or what would happen if you suddenly came off it, then these studies look less than appealing. So, if you're interested in knowing more and setting up a dietary healing program that will work for you and that will most certainly improve your odds for staying well, including for osteoporosis, then please check out the Healing Ourselves course from my website. It's a 5-week online attendance course, 1.5 hours a week. The sessions are recorded, so if you miss one, you can listen in. And you receive materials such as a workbook and copies of the slides. Thank you.